My husband threw me out of the car while my father's grave was still open. Not after the burial, not after the mourners had gone home, not after the final prayer had settled into the earth. Right there, beside the cemetery road, while the black soil was still fresh, while my hands were still shaking, while the last hymn still hung in the cold morning air, my husband opened the car door, grabbed my small bag from the back seat, and dropped it onto the gravel. Then he looked at me like I was the problem. "Find your own way home, Layla." I stood there in my black dress, my shoes sinking into the damp ground, my father's funeral program folded in my hand. I thought I had already felt the worst pain a daughter could feel that day. I was wrong. Because behind my husband, sitting in the front passenger seat of our car, was the woman he had been hiding from me for months. She did not even pretend to feel ashamed. Her name was Camilla Price, and she was wearing pearl earrings I recognized because they were mine. She leaned toward the window, looked at me with a soft smile, and said, "Don't make a scene. Today is already embarrassing enough." Embarrassing. My father had just been lowered into the ground, and she thought my grief was embarrassing. My husband, Adrienne Moore, shut the door and walked around to the driver's side. His mother, Vivian, sat in the back seat, adjusting her black gloves like she was leaving a boring church meeting. She did not defend me. She did not even look sorry. As Adrienne started the engine, Vivian lowered the window halfway and said, "Your father left you nothing anyway. Stop acting like you buried a king." Then the car pulled away, slowly, cruelly, leaving me beside the cemetery road with my father's grave behind me, my bag on the ground, and my marriage disappearing in a cloud of dust. What they did not know was that the quiet man they mocked as poor, the man they believed owned nothing but an old house and a worn-out coat, had been hiding a truth so large it would shake every room they had ever wanted to enter. My father was not a poor man. He was not ordinary. He was one of the richest men alive, a secret trillionaire whose fortune moved quietly through banks, land, technology, shipping, energy, and media companies across the world. And I was his only daughter. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever been humiliated by people who thought you had no one behind you, stay with this story, because sometimes the person they throw out of the car is the same person holding the keys to the road they want to travel. My name is Layla Moore now, but before marriage gave me a name that never truly protected me, I was Layla Kareem, daughter of Yusuf Kareem, a quiet widower who lived in a small stone house at the edge of Savannah, Georgia. If you passed my father on the street, you would never look twice. He wore plain cotton shirts, old leather sandals, and a brown cap that had faded from years of sun. He drove an old white pickup truck with a cracked dashboard and a radio that only worked when it wanted to. He carried his own groceries. He cut his own grass. He fixed broken chairs for neighbors and refused payment unless the person insisted 3 times. To the people in our neighborhood, Yusuf Kareem was a retired warehouse clerk. Some thought he had once worked at the docks. Others believed he had been a small trader. Nobody knew for sure, because my father never corrected anyone. He allowed people to believe whatever made them comfortable. But inside our home, he was not a mystery to me. He was Baba. He woke before sunrise every morning and made tea strong enough to wake the dead. He read 3 newspapers at the kitchen table and circled stories with a red pen. He prayed quietly. He cooked rice with too much garlic. He watered the hibiscus plants my mother had planted before she died. He was gentle, but not soft. There is a difference. Gentle people can still see everything. They simply do not always announce what they know. My mother died when I was 10. After that, it was just the 2 of us. My father raised me with patience that felt almost holy. He taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to speak to people with respect, how to leave a room before anger made me say something I could not take back. Most importantly, he taught me to watch how people treat those they think they do not need. "Layla," he used to say, "a person's character is not found in how they greet the powerful. It is found in how they treat the tired waiter, the old cleaner, the quiet wife, the poor relative, the person they think cannot help them." I heard those words all my life. But hearing wisdom is not the same as living long enough to need it. My father never told me he was rich, not once. We lived simply. I wore second-hand clothes. I worked during college. I learned to cook with what we had, not what we wanted. We did not travel in private jets. We did not have guards outside the house. We did not own a mansion with gates. At least, not one I knew about. Once a month, a black car came to our house. A man in a dark suit would step out, carrying a leather folder. His name was Farid Al-Mansour. He was always polite to me, always respectful, but he never stayed long. He and my father would sit in the study for exactly 1 hour. Afterward, my father would walk him to the door, and the black car would disappear down the dusty road. When I was little, I asked who he was. My father smiled and said, "A man who helps me keep promises." That was all. I met Adrienne Moore when I was 24. He was handsome in a smooth, practiced way. Not the kind of beauty that comes from peace, but the kind that comes from knowing people are watching. He worked as a junior executive at a real estate development firm, and he had the restless hunger of a man who believed life had cheated him out of a throne. Adrienne wanted money. Not comfort, not safety, not stability. Money. Money that announced itself. Money that opened doors before he touched the handle. Money that made waiters stand straighter and old classmates regret laughing at him. Money that could be photographed, displayed, worn, driven, and used like a weapon. When we met, I did not understand that hunger clearly enough. He came into the community center where I worked, looking for a contact person for a housing outreach program. I was coordinating volunteer services then. He arrived late, apologized beautifully, and made everyone in the room laugh within 5 minutes. He looked at me like I was the only person there. That was his gift. Adrienne could make attention feel like love. For months, he courted me with a kind of intensity that made my quiet life feel suddenly bright. He sent flowers to the community center. He asked about my father. He listened when I spoke about my mother. He said I had a calming spirit. He said he needed that. He said the world around him was full of fake people, and I was different. Different. That word can be dangerous when spoken by someone who is tired of his own reflection. My father met Adrienne on a Sunday afternoon. I remember the smell of lamb stew in the kitchen, the sunlight falling across the table, and Adrienne wearing a navy shirt I knew he had chosen carefully. He spoke well. Too well, maybe. He praised my cooking, asked my father polite questions, and said all the right things about family, responsibility, and building a future. My father listened. That was all he did. He listened with the calm face he used when measuring cloth, weather, or men. After Adrienne left, I asked, "Do you like him?" My father poured tea into 2 small cups. "I do not dislike him." That was not the answer I wanted. "What does that mean?" "It means he knows how to speak," my father said. "I am waiting to see if he knows how to stand." I frowned. "For what?" "For you." Love makes warnings sound like doubt, so I ignored him. Adrienne and I married 2 years later in a garden ceremony behind a small hotel. My father paid for most of it, though he made it look simple. Adrienne's mother, Vivian, arrived wearing silver satin and disappointment. She looked around the modest venue and whispered loudly to her sister, "This is what happens when a man marries beneath his potential." I heard it. My father heard it too. Adrienne did not. Or maybe he did and chose not to. That was the first sign. There are moments that do not break your heart immediately. They wait. They sit quietly inside you until one day you realize they were the beginning of everything. Vivian never accepted me. She believed Adrienne was meant for a woman with family connections, social polish, and inherited status, not a community worker with a quiet father and a dead mother. She asked about my family background the way a banker asks about credit history. She wanted names, properties, titles, clubs. When all I gave her was love and honesty, she treated them like cheap coins. Adrienne always said, "That is just how Mama is." I used to believe that explanation. Now I know it is one of the most dangerous sentences in any marriage. Because when a man says, "That is just how she is," what he often means is, "I expect you to suffer quietly so I do not have to confront her." For the first few years, Adrienne was kind enough to keep me hopeful. He worked long hours. I kept our home peaceful. I helped him prepare presentations. I listened to his frustrations. I celebrated every promotion like it was ours, even when he began to speak of success as if he had built it alone. My father watched from a distance. He never interfered. But sometimes when Adrienne left the room, Baba would look at me with eyes too full of things he did not say. The change came slowly. Adrienne began moving in wealthier circles. His firm took on luxury developments. He started attending private dinners and investor events, where people cared less about what you knew and more about who already trusted you. He bought expensive suits before we could comfortably afford them. He leased a car that cost more than cents allowed. He began practicing a laugh that did not sound like him. Then he started correcting me. Not in private, where correction might have been love. In public. At a dinner with his colleagues, I said one investor's last name wrong. Adrienne smiled and placed a hand over mine. It is pronounced Bellamy, sweetheart, not Bellamy. Don't worry, she does that. Everyone laughed. I smiled because I did not want to make things uncomfortable. Another time, I wore a simple black dress to an event. Adrienne looked me up and down before we left and said, "You look nice, but next time let me choose something more suitable. These people notice quality." These people. As if I were not people. As if I were an item he had brought from a smaller life and still needed to polish before presenting. Then came Camilla Price. Camilla was the daughter of a regional hotel owner and the niece of a man Adrienne desperately wanted to impress. She was beautiful in a sharp way. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect smile. She had the kind of confidence people mistake for class when they do not look closely. Adrienne introduced her as a strategic partner. I knew by the way he said her name that she had already become something else. "Layla, this is Camilla. She is helping us with the Port Azure proposal." Camilla gave me a quick hug that did not touch anything real. "Oh, you're Layla," she said. "Adrienne has told me you're very sweet." Sweet. There it was again. The word women use when they want to place another woman beneath them without sounding cruel. I smiled. "And he has told me you are useful." Adrienne's face tightened. Camilla laughed, but her eyes changed. After that, her presence grew. Text messages, late meetings, weekend calls, trips Adrienne claimed were necessary, a perfume smell on his jacket that did not belong to me, a lipstick stain he said came from a client greeting, a hotel receipt he said was for a meeting room. Each lie was thin, but lies do not need to be thick when the person hearing them is afraid of what truth will demand. The worst part was not the affair. It was the way Adrienne's respect disappeared before his loyalty did. He stopped introducing me as his wife with pride. He stopped calling when he would be late. He stopped asking about my work. He began treating my father like an inconvenience. Whenever Baba invited us for dinner, Adrienne found a reason not to go. "Your father's house smells like old wood," he said once. I stared at him. "That house raised me." He shrugged. "Exactly. That should have been enough. But I was still trying to save what he had already abandoned. My father got sick in the spring. At first, he called it tiredness, then weakness. Then the doctors called it something more serious. He did not want pity. He hated hospitals. He kept saying he had lived long enough to know when a journey was close to its final turn. I spent every day I could with him. Adrienne came twice. The first time, he stayed 20 minutes and checked his phone 17 times. The second time, he stood by the window while my father slept and whispered, "How long is this going to go on?" I turned slowly. "What?" He sighed. "Layla, I'm not being cruel, but your whole life is now this room. I have responsibilities too. My father is dying, and I am trying not to lose a major deal. That was the marriage." There it was, naked and ugly, standing between a dying man and a husband who wanted sympathy for being inconvenienced by grief. Baba heard more than Adrienne thought. After Adrienne left, my father opened his eyes. "Come here, my daughter." I sat beside him and took his hand. His fingers were thinner than they used to be, but still warm. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I am gone, do not fight to be loved by people who celebrate your pain." My throat closed. "Baba, promise." "I promise." He nodded. Then he pointed toward the old wooden chest at the foot of his bed. "Inside, there is a black envelope. Do not open it until after the burial, not before." "Why?" His eyes softened. Because people reveal themselves at gravesides. Wait until they do. Those were the last clear words he said to me. 3 days later, Yusuf Karim died. The world did not shake, though mine did. The morning of the burial was gray and heavy. Rain threatened but did not fall. I wore a plain black dress. Not because I could not afford another, but because grief does not need decoration. Adrienne wore a dark suit and annoyance. Vivian arrived in pearls. Camilla arrived too. Nobody had invited her. She stepped out of Adrienne's car, wearing black heels and a fitted dress, carrying a small designer bag. My designer bag. The one Adrienne had given me for our anniversary 2 years earlier, before I knew gifts could be recycled from affection into insult. I looked at Adrienne. What is she doing here? His jaw tightened. Do not start today. Today? She came to support me. I stared at him, unable to understand how a man could say something so selfish beside the coffin of my father. To support you? Camilla placed a hand on his arm. Layla, grief affects everyone differently. I wanted to slap the sentence out of the air. Instead, I turned away. My father had taught me that dignity is not weakness. But that day, dignity felt like carrying fire in my hands and pretending it did not burn. The service was small. Neighbors came. Old men from the mosque came. Women whose children my father had helped through school came. A former dock worker cried openly, pressing a handkerchief against his face. People I had never met whispered blessings over his grave. Adrienne stood apart. Camilla stood beside him. Vivian checked the time. When the final prayer ended, I knelt by the grave and placed my hand on the coffin one last time. Thank you, Baba, I whispered, for raising me, for warning me, for loving me without making love feel like a performance. When I stood, my legs felt weak. I walked toward the car, thinking only of getting home, taking off my shoes, and opening the black envelope my father had left. But when I reached the car, Camilla was sitting in the front passenger seat. My seat. Vivian sat in the back. Adrienne stood by the driver's door, arms crossed. There is no space, he said. I looked at him, confused. What? You can ride with someone else. I glanced at the back seat. Your mother can move over. Vivian made a small sound of disgust. I am not squeezing in like a servant because your father had 5 mourners and no proper arrangements. My father had just been buried. I looked at Adrienne, waiting for the man I married to appear for even 1 second. He did not. Layla, stop making this difficult, he said. I am your wife. Camilla looked out the window and smiled. Not for long, from what I hear. The world went quiet. I turned back to Adrienne. What does that mean? His eyes flickered. Not guilt. Irritation. He opened the rear door, grabbed my small black bag, and dropped it at my feet. Find your own way home, Layla. The gravel made a cruel sound under the bag. I looked from him to Camilla to Vivian. Nobody moved. Nobody softened. Vivian lowered the window and said, Your father left you nothing anyway. Stop acting like you buried a king. Then the car left. I stood there until the sound of the engine disappeared. A woman from my father's neighborhood, Mrs. Salma, came to me slowly. My child, she said, her voice trembling. Let me take you home. I wanted to say yes, but my father's words returned. People reveal themselves at gravesides. And they had. So I picked up my bag, wiped my face, and said, Thank you, but I need to go to my father's house first. Inside my father's house, the silence was different now. Not peaceful, vacant. His teacup still sat beside the sink. His red pen lay on the kitchen table. His sandals were by the back door. The hibiscus plants leaned toward the window like they were waiting for him to come water them. I walked to his bedroom and opened the wooden chest. The black envelope was there. So was a keycard, a phone, and a folded letter. My hands were shaking as I opened the letter. My beloved Layla, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the people around you have shown enough of themselves for the next truth to be safe. I am sorry for the weight of what I kept from you. You knew me as your father. That was the truest part of me. But it was not the only part. Many years before you were born, I built something quietly. It began with shipping, then land, then energy, then data, then the kind of companies that own pieces of the world without putting names on buildings. I hid it, because wealth is loud even when rich men whisper. I wanted you to grow up loved, not hunted. I wanted you to know kindness before power. I wanted you to meet people as yourself before they met your inheritance. Call Fareed. Trust him. Do not let anger drive the car, my daughter. But do not climb back into the car of anyone who threw you out. You are my only child. Everything I protected is now yours. Your Baba. I read the last line again. Everything I protected is now yours. I picked up the phone with numb fingers. It powered on without a password. Only one contact was saved. Fareed, I called. He answered before the first ring ended. Miss Kareem, he said. Not Mrs. Moore. Miss Kareem. I am sorry for your loss. My voice barely came out. What did my father leave me? There was a pause. Not because he did not know, because he understood that after grief, some truths must be placed gently. Your father left you control of the Kareem Global Trust. What is that? Fareed exhaled softly. The largest private holding structure in the world. I sat down on the edge of my father's bed. I do not understand. I know, he said. That was his wish until today. How large? Fareed was silent for 2 seconds. Public estimates would be impossible because the assets are private. But under conservative valuation, the trust controls more than $1 trillion in global holdings. I stopped breathing. The word did not fit inside the room. Trillion. Not million. Not billion. Trillion. My father, who mended broken chairs. My father, who drove an old pickup truck. My father, who let neighbors believe he had been a warehouse clerk. A secret trillionaire. And I was his only daughter. For several minutes, I said nothing. Fareed stayed on the line. He did not rush me. Men who serve true power know. Silence is sometimes part of duty. Finally, I whispered, Does Adrienne know? No. Can he claim anything? No. Fareed said, Your father created legal protections long before your marriage. Your inheritance is separate, private, and shielded. Your husband has no access unless you grant it. I closed my eyes. Adrienne had thrown me out of the car believing my father left nothing. In truth, he had thrown away the only bridge between himself and a world he had spent his whole life begging to enter. What happens now? I asked. A car is on its way, Fareed said. If you are ready, we begin. I looked around my father's small bedroom. The old curtains, the plain bedspread, the worn wooden chest. And for the first time that day, through grief and humiliation and shock, I felt my spine straighten. I am ready. The next 6 months of my life felt like walking through rooms that had been waiting behind a wall. Fareed took me first to a private office downtown, then to another in New York, then to Zurich, then London, then back again. But none of it happened like in movies. There were no wild shopping trips, no shouting, no sudden parade of diamonds. There were documents, endless documents, trust structures, board appointments, private holdings, voting rights, security briefings, confidential ownership maps, companies inside companies inside companies, shipping ports, clean energy grids, agricultural land, artificial intelligence research firms, hospitals, satellite networks, media assets, banks, housing foundations, education trusts. My father had not owned a fortune. He had built an invisible system. And now, that system answered to me. At first, I was angry with him. Not because he left it to me, but because he left me unprepared for its loneliness. I would sit in rooms full of lawyers and executives, hearing them call me Madam Chair, and all I wanted was to ask Baba why he never told me. Fareed always seemed to know when grief was speaking louder than business. One evening, after a 5-hour meeting, he placed a small envelope in front of me. Your father left many letters, he said. This one is for when you feel betrayed by the secret. I opened it in my hotel room. My daughter, you may be angry that I hid the truth. You have the right to be. But understand this. Power given too early can become a cage. I wanted you to know the sound of your own voice before the world tried to speak through your money. I wanted you to learn love from small things. Tea, books, honest work, neighbors, prayer, a father's hand on your shoulder. If I failed you, forgive me. If I protected you, use that protection well. And if anyone ever tells you that you were nothing before this inheritance, remember this: the money did not make you my daughter. Being my daughter made you worthy of the money. I cried until sunrise. Then I stopped being angry. Adrienne filed for divorce 2 weeks after the burial. His lawyer sent the papers to my father's old house, probably expecting me to panic. The filing claimed incompatibility. It requested a clean separation of assets. It accused me of emotional instability after my father's death. It suggested Adrienne had tried to be supportive, but could no longer continue in a marriage damaged by my withdrawal. I almost admired the ugliness of it. Almost. Farid's legal team responded with a letter so calm it felt dangerous. Adrienne expected a fight over the house, the car, the accounts, the furniture. I asked for nothing. Not the house, not the car, not spousal support, not half of his business shares. Nothing. That scared him. Greedy people understand greed. They know how to fight for things. They do not understand a person who walks away empty-handed because she is already carrying something they cannot see. Adrienne called me the day after my response. I watched his name light up my phone. For a long moment, I thought about the cemetery road, my bag on the gravel, Camilla's smile, Vivian's voice. Then I declined. He sent a message. We need to talk like adults. I deleted it. Then another. You are making this harder than it has to be. I deleted that too. The divorce finalized quietly. Adrienne married Camilla 3 months later. I saw the photos online because people sent them to me, thinking I needed to know. Camilla wore white silk. Adrienne wore a black tuxedo. Vivian stood beside them, smiling like she had finally corrected her son's mistake. The caption read, "Finally where we belong." I did not cry. By then, I had learned that some people do not enter your life to stay. They enter to reveal what still needs healing. And some people leave your life thinking they have won, not knowing they walked out right before the inheritance arrived. 1 year after my father's burial, Kareem Global Trust made its first public announcement in decades. Not about the money, about purpose. I created the Yusuf Kareem Foundation for Dignity Housing, a global initiative to build safe homes for widows, abandoned spouses, elderly people, and families pushed out by predatory landlords. My father had owned land across continents. I wanted some of that land to shelter people, not just enrich balance sheets. Farid arranged a televised interview with a major business network. I almost refused. I am not ready to be public, I told him. Farid looked at me gently. Your father hid you to protect your life, not to bury your voice. So I went. The interview took place in a quiet studio with soft lighting and a city skyline behind me. I wore a simple cream suit and my mother's gold bracelet. Not heavy jewelry, not anything Adrienne would have recognized as power. The host introduced me with words that still felt strange. Today we sit with Layla Kareem, newly appointed chair of the Kareem Global Trust and only daughter of the late Yusuf Kareem, the private investor now being called one of the most influential hidden figures in modern financial history. Hidden figure. That was one way to say Baba. The host asked, your father was almost unknown to the public, yet his trust controls assets across several major industries. Why step forward now? I looked into the camera. For 1 second, I saw the cemetery, the open grave, the car door, my bag falling to the gravel. Then I answered, because silence protected me for many years. But now I want our resources to protect other people. My father taught me that wealth means nothing if it cannot defend dignity. That clip traveled fast, faster than anyone expected. By evening, my name was everywhere, and Adrienne saw it at a private investor dinner. That was the part I learned later from someone who had been in the room. He had been seated beside Camilla at a luxury hotel ballroom, trying to impress a group connected to a port development project. Adrienne had been chasing that deal for months. He wanted access to international shipping money. He wanted partners with global reach. He wanted, without knowing it, the approval of companies held under the Kareem Global Trust. The television screens around the ballroom had been showing market news with the sound low. Then my face appeared. At first, Adrienne did not notice. Camilla did. She touched his arm and said, "Is that Layla?" He looked up. The screen showed me seated in the studio, calm and still. Under my name were the words, Layla Kareem Chair, Kareem Global Trust Founder, Yusuf Kareem Foundation. People at the table turned toward him. One man said, "Kareem? Any relation to Yusuf Kareem?" Adrienne's face changed. Another man laughed softly. "Relation? That is his only daughter. She controls the trust now." Camilla's hand left Adrienne's arm. The interview continued. The host said, "Some analysts believe the Kareem Global Trust may be the largest private fortune on Earth, with estimates reaching beyond $1 trillion in controlled assets." Trillion. The same word that had made me sit down on my father's bed. Now it was making Adrienne forget how to breathe in a room full of people he had tried to impress. On screen, I said, "My father lived simply because he believed character should be tested before access is given. He used to say, 'Watch what people do when they think you have nothing.' I have learned that lesson deeply." The table went quiet, because some sentences do not accuse. They simply open a window and let everyone smell the smoke. Adrienne left the dinner before dessert. He called me 12 times. Blocked. He emailed, "Layla, please call me. I had no idea about your father." Then another. What happened at the burial was wrong. I was grieving too, and not thinking clearly. I stared at that line for a long time. He was grieving too, for a man he barely visited, a man he mocked, a man whose daughter he left on the side of a cemetery road. Then came the message I knew would arrive. There may be a way we can help each other. I have access to development opportunities that could align with your foundation. We should meet privately. There it was. Not love, not remorse. Opportunity. I forwarded the email to Fareed. His reply was short. No response advised. But I wanted one meeting. Not because I wanted him back. Not because I needed closure. Closure had already happened when the car drove away. I wanted Adrienne to sit across from the woman he abandoned and understand that his mistake was not leaving me. His mistake was revealing himself. We met in my foundation office. Not the trust headquarters. Not the global boardroom. Not the place where billionaires and ministers called with careful voices. I chose the foundation office because it was filled with pictures of families receiving keys to safe homes. Adrienne arrived wearing his best suit. Camilla did not come. Neither did Vivian. For once he stood alone. My assistant brought him in. He looked around the office, taking in the photographs, the staff, the quiet activity. His face carried the expression of a man entering a building he thought should have belonged to him. "Layla," he said. "Adrienne." He waited for me to stand. I did not. He sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You look well." "I am well. I saw the interview." "I know." His hands moved together on his lap, nervous. That surprised me. Adrienne had always known how to perform confidence. But true power has a way of making performance look thin. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You owe me many." He flinched. I was in a difficult place. "No," I said. "You were in a revealing place." His mouth tightened. "I know the burial was painful." "Do you?" He looked down. "I should not have let you leave that way." I leaned back slightly. "Let me?" He corrected himself quickly. "I should not have made you leave." "You threw me out of the car at my father's burial." He closed his eyes for a second, as if the plain sentence was too ugly to hear without decoration. "Yes," he said, "and I regret it." "Why?" The question confused him. "Because it was wrong." "Was it wrong when you did it? Or did it become wrong when you saw me on television?" His face went still. "There are questions that do not need loudness to cut." Adrienne looked toward the window. "I did not know who your father was." "No," I said. "You knew exactly who he was." He turned back. "You knew him as the man who fed me, raised me, loved me, welcomed you, prayed for us, and died with my name in his heart." That should have been enough. He had no answer. For once, his clever mouth had nowhere to go. I opened a folder on my desk. Inside was his proposal, the one he had emailed through a contact, pretending not to know it would reach me. A housing development plan asking for foundation partnership land access and favorable financing. I slid it across the table. He looked hopeful. "Layla, this could help thousands of families." I smiled sadly. "You should not use poor families as the language for your ambition." His face flushed. "That is not fair." "No, Adrienne. What was not fair was leaving your wife beside a cemetery road because you thought she had no value. What is happening now is simply evaluation." He sat back. "My team reviewed your proposal," I continued. "It is weak. The numbers are inflated. The affordability claims are shallow. The community benefits section reads like a decoration. And 3 companies tied to your partners have prior complaints for tenant displacement." His expression changed from shame to anger. There he was, the real man beneath the apology. "So you are punishing me?" "No," I said. "I am protecting people from you." He stood suddenly. "You think money makes you better than me?" I looked at him calmly. "No. I think money made it impossible for you to keep pretending you were better than me." Silence. His face hardened, then broke slightly, then hardened again. "You would have given me everything," he said quietly, almost to himself, "if I had just waited." That sentence told me the apology was finished, and so was the meeting. I stood. "No, Adrienne. If you had loved me, I would have shared my life with you. But you would never have owned what my father built, because he saw you before I was ready to." He stared. I walked to the door and opened it. For a moment, I saw the cemetery again, him opening a car door, my bag falling, the world watching quietly. Now I was the one holding the door. But I did not throw him out. I simply let him leave. That is the difference between power and cruelty. Months passed. Adrienne's life did not collapse in one dramatic moment. Real life is often slower than people want stories to be. His deal failed, then another. Camilla left when the opportunities dried up. Vivian called Farid's office once, claiming there had been misunderstandings within the family. She was told all communication must go through legal channels. She never called again. I heard Adrienne moved into a smaller apartment near the business district, still wearing good suits, still chasing rooms, still trying to stand beside power without understanding the character required to remain there. As for me, I kept building. The Yusuf Karim Foundation opened its first dignity housing community on land my father had purchased 30 years earlier. On opening day, I walked through rows of bright homes with widows, children, elderly couples, and women starting over after being pushed out by people who thought they had nowhere else to go. One woman held my hands and said, "I was sleeping in my car 3 months ago." I thought of the cemetery road. I thought of my bag on the gravel. I thought of how close humiliation can feel to homelessness, even when you are dressed in black and standing beside a grave. That day, we named the main road Baba Way. Farid cried quietly when he saw the sign. So did I. A year and a half after my father's death, I returned to the cemetery alone. No cameras, no guards close enough to disturb the silence, no reporters, no Adrienne, no Camilla, no Vivian. Just me, and the man who had hidden the world in plain sight so his daughter could learn how to stand without it first. I placed white flowers on his grave. Then I sat beside him and told him everything. About the trust, the foundation, the interview, the houses, the women, the children, the way people said his name now, with awe, when I still heard it as the voice calling me to breakfast. Finally, I said, "I understand why you waited." The wind moved through the trees. For a moment, it sounded like the old hibiscus leaves outside his kitchen window. People think inheritance is always about receiving money. It is not. Sometimes inheritance is receiving the strength someone spent their whole life preparing for you. Sometimes it is learning that the quiet lessons were worth more than the hidden accounts. Sometimes it is discovering that the person you thought lived small had actually mastered the art of living deep. My husband threw me out of the car at my father's burial because he thought I had nothing. But what he really did was leave me at the exact place where my old life ended and my true name began. He thought the grave was proof that I was alone. But the grave was the doorway. He thought my father left me nothing. But my father left me wisdom first and power second. He thought Camilla in the front seat meant he had chosen better. But all he chose was the kind of woman who loved the car more than the road. And when he finally saw me on television, when he finally understood that the poor man he mocked had been a secret trillionaire, when he finally realized the quiet wife he abandoned controlled the doors he had been begging to enter, it was too late. Because by then, I had stopped waiting for a seat in his car. I had become the road. And the lesson my father left me was simple. When people think you are nothing, let them speak. When they think you are powerless, let them act. When they throw you out, do not chase the car. Stand where you are. Pick up what belongs to you. Open the envelope, and walk into the life they were never worthy enough to share.